So if you like to watch literal content genius do all the best stuff, try the subscribering thing. I don't really care what you do. All right, so the plan today is I'm going to do a tier list. And I'm going to rank which Pokemon in VGC Competitive Series 11 got a buff and which ones got a nerf relative to how they were in Series 10, right? So from Series 10 to Series 11, which restricted Pokemon get a buff and which restricted Pokemon get a nerf in Series 11 Competitive VGC. All right, so the first one I'm going to start with is Ice Horse. I think this actually got a buff. The reason I think it gets buffed is because it's relatively bulky, right? You'd think, oh, it's got the spread moves and stuff when it's not, as its like signature move gimmick. That's the nice thing is like it's already very bulky. So if you do want to Dynamax it, you can give it like a steel and ground coverage, and then what you do is max Quake, max Steel Spike. Those will give you a defense or a special defense buff. And I think it can add to its bulk. And then with a weakness policy, you can even do self-activating weakness policies and stuff, but I don't think you need it with Ice Horse. But weakness policy users are going to get a big buff in the series just because with Dynamax, you double your HP, and then you can do things to self-activate the weakness policy better without having to worry about taking too much damage. I think there's a nerf to the Calyrex Ghost Horse. Because the thing is you want to be, when you're using Ghost Horse, you want to be fast and you want to hit everything hard, right? You want to get, one-hit KOs or just do a lot of damage with it. And with Pokemon being able to Dynamax and double their HP, you aren't able to get the value of the like one-hit knockouts as often as you used to be able to. And I guess you could Dynamax it, but it's just not. It doesn't have enough bulk to, I think, justify Dynamaxing it very often. But it does get good coverage with its max moves, right? Max Ghost flavor is gonna be good. But another reason though that it kind of gets nerfed is Regigigas, right? Regigigas is going to be popular again, right? With Regigigas being immune to the ghost flavor attack, that's going to be important. You're going to see a lot more Regigigas because Dynamax really helps Regigigas out. You can Dynamax, and then max normal flavor will cause the opponent's Pokemon to lose one speed, right? So it'll decrease their speed, one stage when you use max normal flavor. That's why, that's why Regigigas is going to be more popular with Weezing, and Weezing's ability turns off the other Pokemon ability, right? Neutralizing gas. So then, like, if there's more Weezing, you won't get benefit from your Ghost Horse's ability is unnerved, and then like the other thing where you get like the special attack buff when you get a KO. It's kind of like Moxie for special Pokemon. So yeah, I think overall it gets a nerf. Maybe I don't think Ice Horse actually gets a buff. No, it does. Just because like its max coverage moves do give it a little bit of extra bulk. I wouldn't say it's a buff though. I would just say it's different because no, it's still a buff. The other thing, you'll never use this, so like this isn't gonna matter. You won't use it unless it has a horse. Dialga though, Dialga gets a buff. I think Dialga gets a big buff because it's same type attack bonus attacks, right? Dragon flavor and steel attacks. When those are max moves, you get max Steel Spike gets you a defense buff. Max Dragon, which is pretty important because right now, when they're not max moves, the strong Dragon flavor attacks for Dialga are Draco Meteor, which decreases your special attack 2 stages after you use it, or Roar of Time, I think, is the other one, which is you use the attack and then you have to like recharge the next turn, so you can't do anything your second turn there. There's a big drawback to using strong dragon attacks with Dialga, and you won't have that with Dynamax, right? Because you can just Dynamax, do a big strong dragon attack, and you also get the side effect of dropping your opponent's attack stat 1 stage. That's gonna be good. And also, Steel Spike raises defense. Also, weakness policy stuff too, right? Dialga has a large special attack stat. I think it's like 150 base or something. It's pretty good. It just doesn't feel like it does enough damage with its same type attack moves, Being able to Dynamax will be nice because then you can activate weakness policies and stuff, like with even doing like an Earthquake. So you can self-proc your weakness policies if you want to run a weakness policy set. You don't have to. And being able to Dynamax, giving it more bulk. Yeah, I think overall it just helps it a lot. Dynamax does, because I tried using it without Dynamax in Series 10, and type-wise, the typing is good. Good defensive typing for the most part. Being weak to fighting isn't very good, but that's not a big deal. And then that's also another thing too, is that if a Pokemon wants to do a fighting attack and they Dynamax, max fighting flavor attacks are usually like 90 base attack, right? So a lot of time you're better off not Dynamaxing if you want to do like a strong fighting type move into it. This thing, I think this actually gets a nerf. The reason it gets a nerf is you'd think, oh, well, it has 1 attack, right? It kind of like Zacian or whatever, like it ignores, it does like double damage or something with Pokemon as Dynamax. I think Eternatus has a move like that. I don't know. I don't think you usually run it when you're using Eternatus. If you're bringing Eternatus, you can't Dynamax it, right? It doesn't Dynamax. So you lose some flexibility with your Dynamax when there's Pokemon on your team that can't Dynamax. And also, like, ground flavor attacks are going to be stronger because you're going to see more with max moves. Its speed stat is relatively good, but the thing is there's going to be a lot more max chair stream, right? Max flying flavor. And with that, it increases, your side of the field when you use max airstream by 1 stage speed stat. Speed stat increases by 1 stage. So you get the speed buff. So a lot of Pokemon will be able to outspeed it when it's +1. Yeah, mostly not being able to Dynamax hurts it. If other Pokemon can Dynamax, right? Like, if no one can Dynamax, then it doesn't matter. But this thing... Wait, I'm gonna make a new category, okay? Let's make a new category. How do I do that? And this category right here is gonna be I do not care. And this is one of those Pokemon where it's not a good Pokemon. Don't use it. If you like it, use it. I don't care. But does it improve with Dynamax or in series? Does this Pokemon improve in Series 11 compared to Series 10? Or is it worse? The thing is I don't know because I've never used it. So, no, I don't care. I do think Groudon gets a buff. A lot of people say, you don't want to Dynamax Groudon and stuff because it's primary moves it does that are same type attack bonus, right, is Precipice Blades, is a spread attack. You lose the spread attack gimmick, right, when you Dynamax. It becomes a single target attack with Max Quake. I think, though, it does give you more, like, variability, right? Like, you can do... being able to Dynamax it might seem like you don't want to most of the time, but if there's instances where, hey, if I miss this attack, I could lose, you do want it to be single target, you can just Dynamax, and then Max Quake doesn't miss, right? Max moves will not miss. So I think the added ability to still do a strong same type attack move and have the option to not miss the attack is really good. Yeah, a lot of people say you aren't going to Dynamax it very often, and you're probably not going to. But especially when on the team that you're going to be using, it's likely you're going to be using Venusaur, right? But that's the thing. Why is Groudon going to be better? I think is because Venusaur is better, right? Venusaur can Dynamax now. It has the damage over time gimmick with its max grass flavor attack for its Gigantamax move or whatever it's called. So yeah, Venusaur getting better. This is a Pokemon you're going to want to team with it, so, but not directly, but indirectly, Venusaur getting better makes Groudon better also. Ho gets buff, right? This is a buff. You'd think like, but the thing is like, a lot of the coverage that you do with it is like steel coverage, some ground coverage, and those things, if you do choose to Dynamax it, those things will make it even more bulky. You know, like defense buff, special defense buff. I was considering that I don't think it's much of a change, and if anything, it might be a little bit of a nerf, but you know what I mean? Like, it's tough because, like, where there are disadvantages, or where it does, like, get nerfed, right? In the aspect of, you know, other Pokemon can get bulkier and you can't really, like, one-shot things like you were before. And it's so bulky that, like, when you do Dynamax it, it's hard to KO. That's something that you need to consider too. So, I don't know. I think it's probably not much of a change. I don't know. I just put it there. Another Pokemon that gets a nerf. I think Kyogre gets a nerf, right? Because if you want to Dynamax it, you don't get the benefit of spread moves. Max moves become single target. And similar thing to Calyrex Ghost is if you're using it, you're wanting to get one-hit KOs or do like a whole lot of damage. And if your opponent's able to Dynamax, if you do like a Water Spout, you're just not going to be doing as much damage to a Pokemon that's Dynamax because they have twice as much HP. I still think Kyogre is going to be one of the best restricted Pokemon in competitive. It's just going to be not as strong. Also because Venusaur gets stronger, right? If Venusaur is getting stronger, being able to Dynamax and do big grass flavor attack, the residual damage and stuff from the max Venusaur attack or whatever you call it. This thing I don't care. Like, I don't know what it is. Are these all the different color Hurums? I'm just gonna do the one because I don't care. I mean, technically it probably does get a buff, right? With it's weak to fighting. It's weak to fighting. And like fighting max moves are not very scary. Just because they don't do much. You know what? Maybe it does get a buff. But I just don't care. I don't care anything about the Pokemon. This gets a buff. This gets a buff because you're able to Dynamax it, and the biggest issue with Lugia is it doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't do enough damage. Very bulky, relatively fast. But it's the reason it gets a buff is because you can Dynamax it. I actually didn't explain Ho-Oh, did I? Similar reasons, right? They have flying type coverage, right? They're same type attack, flying. So you're going to want to not always Dynamax these Pokemon, right? Because they're very good not Dynamaxed. Usually Ho-Oh teams, you're probably not going to Dynamax Ho-Oh. But it does give you the option to do a max flying flavor attack and increase your speed. That's a big deal. So max Airstream is going to give a buff to a lot of Pokemon that want to use it, or at least have flying coverage if they do choose to Dynamax, right? That also helps Lugia, because then you can also Dynamax and activate a weakness policy, right? Because Lugia doesn't do a whole lot of damage if you don't have a weakness policy. So if you're able to Dynamax, double your HP, self-activating a weakness policy isn't as big of a deal, right? Because you're not, you're taking a smaller percentage of damage when you're Dynamaxed. That's why it gets a buff. Ho gets a buff just because it's stab, right? Yeah, flying flavor. Max flying, right? Gives you +1 speed. That's pretty much why I would say that Ho gets a buff. Not that you're going to Dynamax it very often, but you do have the option. And it does give your side of the field +1. And the thing with flying moves is there's usually a drawback to strong flying moves, right? Either they're like Fly, where it's a 2-turn attack, Brave Bird, where you take recoil damage, Hurricane, it's not accurate, unless you're in water or in rain, right? So there's a big drawback to a lot of flying moves, but if you can just like put a flying move on a Pokemon and then Dynamax and it just becomes max Airstream, that's really good. But yeah, I think weakness policy Pokemon get a buff because they don't have to worry about taking much damage when they self-activate it. This thing, I don't know. Like, I don't think there's much of a change, right? It was already pretty good before. I don't think it really changed. We can think a little bit. What Pokemon? Well, maybe it did get nerfed. I think the reason it got a nerf is because one of the moves that it can use is Wide Guard, right? And Wide Guard is strong for spread moves, right? You use Wide Guard and it protects your side of the field from spread type attacks. The thing is Wide Guard gets nerfed because Pokemon like Kyogre that uses spread type moves like Water Spout, if it chooses to Dynamax, that move becomes a single target move, and then Wide Guard doesn't work. So I think Wide Guard getting a nerf because of Dynamax is a little bit of a nerf, but yeah, I don't think it's matters that much to that Pokemon. If I were to like rank it, D tier to S tier or whatever, I think it would still be a, B plus or an A. It would keep like the same tier rating, you know what I mean? But it is a little bit weaker than it was before. Mewtwo gets buff. Because Mewtwo can Dynamax. Because I think Mewtwo... Oh, no. Mewtwo gets access to Hurricane, right? And Hurricane turns into max Airstream when you Dynamax. I don't think you're going to be seeing that kind of stuff, but very often. And you're not going to Dynamax Mewtwo much. I think the thing is the thing that Mewtwo does well, Ghost Horse does better. Ghost Horse is faster, and it hits harder, and its ability is better. Its ability is actually Mewtwo's ability plus something else, but it does get a buff because of its coverage, right? It gets pretty good coverage. Having access to flying coverage is good because you can Dynamax. You could even do like weakness policy stuff with it if you wanted to. You could have a Pokemon that's maybe EV'd to be a little bit faster than it, and then like fling a Salic Berry on it, right? So then it activates the weakness policy because it's a dark type attack, Fling is, but then also the Salic Berry gives it +1 speed, right? So it gets +1 speed and then +2 special attack boost in one turn. And then if you like max it and then do max Airstream or something, it could get even faster. So there's things you can do with it, but I don't think it's good. It is better than it used to be, just because whereas it gets like coverage with Fire Blast and stuff, like relatively inaccurate moves or just being able to turn things into max moves helps it because it gets good coverage and max flying. Are these the weird flavors of them? This one, I don't think it changed much. This one kind of gets a buff, I think, just because weakness policy, right? You can activate weakness policy on it better. Not as big of a buff as Solgaleo does, right? Because Solgaleo, it's same type attack. Moves like steel types. You can Dynamax it, use max steel spike, and then it buffs its defense with max steel spike. That's good. Its ability clear body, you can do stuff like bulldoze to activate a weakness policy, dropping the speed of the opponents but not of your Solgaleo because of its clear body type ability, right? So yeah, Dynamax really helps Solgaleo, mostly because of self-activating weakness policy stuff. This thing, I don't think I care. Like, you don't use this when it's not mixed with the other Pokemon, right? Okay, Palkia gets a buff, right? The reason Palkia gets a buff, is because Palkia's water moves, or, you know, same type attack bonus, right, with water moves, are not accurate, right? Like Hydro Pump, they're like 80% accurate, they can miss and stuff like that, and it's still single target. So being able to Dynamax and then do a max move that won't miss is pretty important. I think that really helps it out. Its typing is fantastic, right? Like, its typing is really good. But I think being able to have the option to Dynamax and be accurate really helps it. This thing, like, I don't care. I mean, technically it might get a buff, but I don't think it... What is its attack spread move? Its primary attack is spread move or something like that. So yeah, if it does spread moves, it gets a little bit of a nerf. But then being able to max and do flying moves helps it. I don't know. I just don't care. So I'm not gonna say anything just because I don't know anything about that Pokemon. Nope, I'm gonna actually tell you, this actually gets a buff, or a nerf. The reason it gets a nerf isn't because of anything regarding it. It's regarding Lapras, right? Lapras is now going to be a good Pokemon again. Lapras being able to Gigantamax and do its max ice flavor that sets up Aurora Veil is really strong. So just like Lapras being viable hurts it, because that means there's a Pokemon that will be doing ice attacks. So no, ice attacks hurt it. So I think it's nerfed because Lapras gets a buff. But other than that, yeah, I don't care. Like, I don't like the Pokemon. I don't think it's good. This gets a nerf. Actually, I'll move to this one first. This one actually gets a buff, right? Because the gimmick with them is that its primary attacks that it likes to do is not accurate, right? You can miss its attacks. So I think being able to Dynamax helps it, gives it a little bit more bulk. It's already pretty bulky, right? You run like Assault Vest on it and stuff. And also the Pokemon that are going to be stronger are going to be like Venusaur. You know, it matches up pretty well against Venusaur. This gets a nerf, right? This is actually a pretty big nerf. The reason it gets a big nerf is because Steel type attacks with max Steel Spike kind of get a buff, right? So you're going to see more Steel type attacks. And also Pokemon that don't normally use Steel type attacks when they're not Dynamaxed, like a Pokemon that might only get access to like Iron Tail or something that's only 70% accurate. Well, now if they Dynamax, they get max Steel Spike, which is accurate, and it gives them a buff. Which, you know, a physical defense buff doesn't matter against Xerneas, but it might against other Pokemon that are teamed up with Xerneas. And it doesn't really want to Dynamax. It likes being able to have the option to Dazzling Gleam. And Protect is nerfed, right? A lot of times, being able to maneuver your way to find an opportunity to set up the geomancy is really important, right? So fake out is helpful for it, for its partner, right? For its teammate to use fake out. It using protect is important. Protect is nerfed because max moves do damage through protect, right? And also fake out doesn't work on Dynamax Pokemon, right? You can't flinch a Dynamax Pokemon, so if you go and lead Incineroar and Xerneas, hoping to fake out Geomancy, you can't fake out the Pokemon if they Dynamax. So it's still strong. I think it can still be. Now, when I say things get big nerfs, remember, it doesn't mean that this Pokemon here is better than this Pokemon here, right? Or it doesn't mean, you know, Mewtwo is better than Xerneas. It just means that Mewtwo is relatively better compared to Mewtwo Series 10 in Series 11. So this isn't comparing them to each other, it's comparing the Pokemon to itself in Series 10 and how I expect it to be better or worse in Series 11. But yeah, I still think it's a very strong and good Pokemon. I just think it's the rule changes in Series 11 nerf that Pokemon. And also with Venusaur being able to Dynamax, making Venusaur a little bit more bulky and then doing max poison attack, can hit through protect, and then it'll also like buff the special attack of Venusaur's side doing max poison. That's something to consider. Yveltal gets buff, right? It gets a buff because you can do weakness policy stuff, right? Weakness policy is going to be more viable on it because you can self-activate it with like a Volt Switch or something and not worry about taking as much damage. Max flying, right? It having flying stab, same type attack bonus, right? From flying. Helps it with max airstream being able to increase its speed. Yeah, flying gets such a buff. Such a buff, dude. That's the one thing that I kind of liked about Series 10 is because you saw less flying. So like Galarian Zapdos was a little bit more viable because it didn't have to worry about other Pokemon having as much flying coverage. No, not that much of a buff because like Galarian Moltres does that role with the Dynamaxing better, right? And being access to Sucker Punch, right? You get with Yveltal, Sucker Punch, Snarl. It's Oblivion Wing heals it, so like a lot of times you don't want to Dynamax it, but it gives you the option, so it does give you a buff there. If you're like running it to do like, hey, I want to Dynamax and weakness policy it, if that's like the primary goal of doing it, using that Pokemon, you're better off using Moltres because then you can just use another restricted that maybe doesn't want to Dynamax, like Zacian. So then you can use Zacian and Moltres, right? Zacian's going to be a tough one because Zacian's like primary move, right? It's Behemoth Blade. Does double damage if the Pokemon is Dynamaxed. So the extra bulk that a Pokemon gets from Dynamaxing is ignored if Zacian does Behemoth Blade. But that's the thing. Only if it does Behemoth Blade, right? If it does other coverage moves like, you know, Close Combat, Sacred Sword, Play Rough, those don't, right? So if the Pokemon resists, like a resist Steel type, if it resists Steel type attack, and it doesn't really help it too much because you'd want to do a different attack into it anyway. And then it also can Dynamax, right? And it not being able to Dynamax makes you a little bit less flexible with your Dynamax option. You know, people will disagree with this because they're like, oh no, that's its move does double damage, so Dynamax doesn't matter. It does because you can't Dynamax. So I think you get a nerf. You get a nerf. And also, Max Quake gets better, right? Some attacks from, Groudon and stuff. You could be like, oh, if you just miss your Precipice Blades on the Zacian, that can be a problem, but then you can just Dynamax and hit a 100% accurate move, if that's the situation, right? So, I'm thinking of like scenarios where Dynamax would be good for Groudon in that situation, but not always. Yeah, I think it gets a little bit of a nerf just because it can't Dynamax. Charizard's better, right? With Dynamax, Charizard's better. Charizard being better makes Zacian relatively weaker, just because Charizard has the residual damage that you get from its max, or its G-Max move or whatever it is, Wildfire. And it also gets flying coverage, being able to increase it and its partner's speed. So yeah, Charizard being better hurts it. But then there is a slight nerf to Incineroar because of, Fake Out not working on Dynamax Pokemon. So if you consider that, okay, Incineroar is a little bit less strong than it was, maybe that helps Zacian. I also didn't mention too, the reason weather setters like Kyogre are going to be a little bit weaker too is because you can change the weather now with max moves, right? You could do max ice flavor, changes it to hail, so max moves can change the weather, which really nerfs weather setters like Kyogre. And because of that, maybe I should reconsider Groudon. Maybe I don't think there's much of a change to Groudon, just because that's a pretty big disadvantage, right? Not being able to be as impactful with setting the weather. But yeah, this thing don't care, right? Like, you just don't use it. This thing is another one that actually might be stronger, but I don't really know. I can think its max moves actually might get a little bit of a buff, right? Because then it's same type attack moves like Electric Flavor, being accurate. I don't know if its primary moves aren't accurate, just because I don't know anything about it. But it being able to be 100% accurate and change the weather, or not the weather, the terrain. You can change the terrain with max Electric Flavor. And its other stab is Dragon, right? So yeah, its other move being a Dragon attack, being accurate, strong, and being able to drop the attack stat of opposing Pokemon, that's really strong. I think Max Dragon getting stronger also hurts Zacian too, because there's more ways to drop your attack stat, right? This thing I don't care. Like, this thing actually probably gets a big nerf. The reason it gets a big nerf is because its gimmick move, right, is, I don't know, like something about arrows. Right, I don't know. Its gimmick move is something about arrows, and the arrow gimmick move makes it so like flying Pokemon and stuff get hit by ground attack that it is, I guess. So like levitate Pokemon and flying Pokemon get hit by this arrow ground flavor attack that it does, right? Whatever it is, Zygarde. And when you Dynamax, you no longer get the benefit when you do Max Quake of not being able to, or being able to hit flying types with ground attack. So you lose the benefit of that with Dynamax. And also, Lapras, using its max ice attack, just Lapras being better, really hurts Pokemon that are weak to ice, especially if they're 4 times weak to ice, like Zygarde is. 4 times weakness to ice is really tough when there's going to be more Lapras around. So if you like seeing literal gaming geniuses do all the coolest stuff, yeah, watch more, I guess. All right.